The lights in the Grand Meridian's Grand Ballroom died at 8:40 in the evening, and 3 seconds later, the glass came apart. 80 people went down on the floor. The masked men took the doors, the elevators, the security room. They did not ask for money. Their leader swept the room with his eyes. He measured the men in suits. He measured the watches. His gaze slid past a black man in a maintenance uniform holding his 8-year-old daughter, the way a gaze slides past an empty chair. They had picked the right hotel and the right target. The only man they never bothered to look at was the only one they should have feared. 6 hours before the lights went out, the north elevator at the Grand Meridian made a sound it should not have made, and Isaiah Reed heard it from 4 floors away. He was on his knees in a service corridor with a panel open in front of him, chasing a fault in the backup lighting circuit. The sound came down through the shaft like a coin dropped into a jar. He set his screwdriver on the floor and listened until it repeated, then wrote "North car drag" on the return in the maintenance log he carried in his back pocket. 3 pages earlier was an entry from 3 weeks ago about a ballroom camera that had drifted a few inches off its mount. Nobody upstairs had considered that urgent. He had written it down anyway because writing it down was what you did with the things you could not fix yet. That was the shape of him at 39. He fixed what he could reach and kept a list of the rest. His daughter was in the staff break room because her school had closed early for a burst pipe, and there had been nobody else to take her. Maya Reed was 8 years old and had been given a pencil and the back of a stack of banquet order forms, and she had covered 4 of them already. She was not drawing horses or houses. She was drawing the hotel. "That's not where the kitchen is," Isaiah said, leaning over her shoulder. She looked at her own work with the seriousness of a surveyor. "You said the kitchen was under the ballroom." "It's under the west side of the ballroom." He turned the paper and drew a small square with 2 lines coming off it. "And that's the laundry. The linen carts run through there to the service stair. That's how the towels get up to 11 without anybody seeing them." Maya added the square carefully. She had a symbol she used for doors that opened only one way, a little half moon, because he had explained the fire doors to her once, and she had decided they needed their own mark. He had forgotten telling her. She had not. "Where are we going this weekend?" she asked. "Wherever the map says." She bent back over the paper, and Isaiah stood there a second longer than he needed to, the way he had been standing near her for 4 years now. He had not always been a man who fixed elevators. He had spent 9 years in the Navy, most of it in places he did not name, and he had come home for the last time to a wife who was already dying and a daughter who was 4. When it was over, he had turned in the part of his life that required him to leave, and he had taken a job with a name badge and a set of keys, and he had never once said out loud that he missed any of it. But he still sat where he could see the door. He still counted the people in a room without deciding to. And when a busboy dropped a tray of glasses near the break room entrance, Isaiah was between the sound and Maya before the first shard finished skidding across the tile. The busboy was Cameron Ruiz, 22, 6 weeks on the job, and he laughed at himself while he knelt to gather the pieces. "Sorry, man, that's the second one this week." "Third," Isaiah said. "But who's counting?" Cameron stood up with his hands full of glass and his tie sitting crooked and too short under his collar. He turned so Isaiah could see it. "Is it bad?" "They're putting me on the floor tonight because of the conference. There's like 400 people. Isaiah took the ends of the tie and redid the knot without thinking about it, one motion, the way a man does something he has done 10,000 times. "Night classes start in September," Cameron said as he checked it. "Hospitality management, 2 years, and then I'm the one telling somebody else their tie is crooked. Then don't let them see you drop anything." Daniel Brooks came through the corridor a few minutes later with a clipboard under his arm and a limp he had stopped apologizing for. He ran security at the Grand Meridian, which mostly meant lost key cards and drunk conventioneers, and he had been a Navy corpsman for 11 years before a knee took that away from him. He stopped where an older guest was sitting on a bench with her shoe off, waiting for a car that had not come. He did not call anyone. He got down on his good knee, looked at the ankle, told her which way it was going to swell and which way it was not, and then walked her to a chair by the window where the light was better and someone at the desk could see her. "You still do that faster than the paramedics," Isaiah said when he came back. Daniel shrugged. Anybody can carry somebody. The trick is knowing who to carry first. 2 floors above them, Ava Sterling was giving the last interview of the day and enjoying it more than she should have. She was 34 and she ran a financial technology company called Sterling Dynamics, and tomorrow morning she was going to stand in that ballroom and show 400 investors a system that could watch money move and tell you when the movement was a lie. What she was not going to say from the stage was that she had already run it against her own client records, and that some of what came back had made her stop sleeping. Laundering, market manipulation, payments to people whose services did not have names. All of it was sitting on a temporary server in the operations room off the ballroom on the same floor behind one wall. The reporter asked her the obvious question. What happens if somebody takes you into a room and makes you open it? Ava smiled because she had been waiting for that one all week. Everyone assumes a lock reads your body, she said. Mine reads your state, heart rate, the way your eyes move when you're not being watched. The rhythm of a sequence only I know, and the gaps inside it. If the physiology comes back wrong, if I'm frightened or hurt, or somebody's holding my wrist, the system doesn't open badly. It closes permanently. She said it like a sales line. She said it the way a person says a thing that has never been tested. Then she checked her phone and sent a 2-word message to her brother Ethan, who held the second half of a switch neither of them had ever expected to use if she went quiet. For long enough, he would turn his key and everything on that server would land in a federal inbox by morning. The man who was going to take the hotel arrived at 6 in a delivery uniform and spent 2 hours learning nothing he did not already know. Victor Kane had been a contractor before he had been whatever he was now, and he read rooms the way other men read weather. He had studied the floor plans for 11 days. He had a client, and the client wanted a woman's evidence erased, then the woman, then the witnesses in that order dressed up afterward as a kidnapping that went wrong. Victor did not hate anyone in the building. That was what made him worse than the men who did. He had one habit, and it had never cost him anything. He sorted people. Suit, watch, posture, position in the room, and then a category, and the category was the person from then on. It was fast, and it was almost always right. At 8:40, when the power dropped to the generators and 11 men in service jackets stopped serving, the categories came out of his mouth in order. The room went down. The exits went closed. Somewhere behind the bar, a woman was praying in a whisper, and a man was telling her to stop. Daniel Brooks got his hands up early and went to the floor without argument and started doing the only work he had left, which was deciding from where he lay which of these people were going to fail first. And Isaiah Reed took his daughter behind the maintenance counter and put his body between her and the room, and his life stopped being about finishing a shift. He watched for 90 seconds before he understood. They were not collecting phones for the value of them. They walked past the coat check with $40,000 worth of watches in it. Nobody asked about a safe. 2 of them took Ava Sterling by the arms and moved her toward the operations room without a word, and a third followed carrying a hard case that Isaiah had seen the shape of before in another life on another continent. Then a 4th man knelt at the base of the ballroom's south support column and pressed something to it with both hands, and Isaiah understood that no one was coming through the front doors tonight. This was not a robbery. This was a cleanup. There were 2 men reading the same room that night. Victor read it by sorting. Who wore what, who sat where, who might become a problem. He put 80 human beings into boxes and then governed the boxes with a gun and a voice and the fear that filled the space between them. It was fast, it was economical, and it was very nearly correct. Isaiah read it by counting. How many doors? How many steps between one patrol and the next? The woman at table 4 who was breathing too fast and would faint inside 10 minutes. The old man by the column who would not be able to get up quickly if anyone had to run. The same room, 2 different maps. One of them told you who was worth controlling. The other told you who had to go out first. And there was a flaw in the way Victor read, which was that a man who sorts well never goes back to check the boxes he has already marked empty. That night, the empty box was sitting 17 paces from him, with one hand flat on an 8-year-old's shoulder, and it had been there the whole time. Under the counter, Maya's breathing had gone high and shallow and quick, and her fingers were locked around a fistful of his sleeve. He did not tell her it was going to be all right. He had learned a long time ago what that promise costs when you cannot keep it. He got down so she could see his face, and he said, "Look at me. Slow breath in, count to 4. We just do the next right thing." She counted. Her shoulders came down half an inch. When a person cannot control what is happening to them, they can still control the very next thing they do. It is a small piece of ground. Sometimes it is the only piece there is. By 9 o'clock, Isaiah had the room memorized, and knowing it was worse than not knowing. The reception had emptied out after the dinner service, which was the only mercy of the night. 400 people had come through those doors at 7. By 8:40, there were 80 left, and he had counted them twice from behind the maintenance counter while his daughter breathed against his ribs. 11 men had taken the hotel. 6 of them worked the ballroom in a rotation that came around every 2 minutes and 40 seconds, and the other 5 were somewhere he could not see, which he liked even less. The one who gave orders wore a black watch on his left wrist and checked it more often than a man checks the time. Twice he had looked at it when nothing had happened at all. That watch was the reason Isaiah stayed exactly where he was. He could have taken the nearest man. 2 seconds, maybe 3. He had done harder things in worse light. But somewhere under the south column and the 2 stairwells, there was enough charge to fold this floor into the one beneath it, and he did not know how much or how many places, and the trigger for it was strapped to the wrist of a man who had not raised his voice once all evening. So he did nothing. He crouched behind a counter with his hand on Maya's back and let the minutes go by, and every minute cost him something he could not get back. A man who can act and chooses not to is not resting. He is holding a weight. They had taken Ava Sterling into the operations room off the ballroom, and for the first 20 minutes, Victor Kane was patient in the way a man is patient with a machine. He put her in the chair. He turned the screen toward her. When she refused, he took her wrist and pressed her palm flat against the reader himself and held her there while she twisted, and the interface did exactly what she had promised a reporter it would do 6 hours earlier. It read her pulse at 140. It read her eyes. It read a hand that was not moving of its own accord. Then it stopped and put a single line on the screen. Coerced attempt. 2 remaining. Victor let go of her and read the line twice. "Explain that," he said. Ava's arm was shaking, and she put it in her lap so he would not see. 3 tries. After the 3rd, it seals. And when it seals, it sends. Sends where? Wherever I told it to send. He absorbed that the way another man might absorb a change in the weather. Somewhere on the other end of an encrypted line, a voice he answered to said something short, and Victor said, "I'm aware," and put the phone in his pocket. Then he crouched in front of her chair so his eyes were level with hers, and he spoke almost courteously. "So I can't hurt you. You understand that I understood that faster than you expected." He tilted his head. "But you have to be calm to open it, and I have 80 people out there who don't have to be calm at all. So, I'll let somebody else be frightened on your behalf, Miss Sterling, until you decide you'd rather they weren't." Outside on the avenue, 6 blocks of the city had gone red and blue, and a police captain was learning that the front doors had been rigged and that nobody was going through them tonight. Isaiah found the way out at 20 past 9. He had been running the building in his head the way he ran a circuit. Where does it go? What feeds it? Where does it break? The linen carts went from the laundry through a low corridor under the ballroom's west side and came up at the service stair, and the fire door at the top of that stair opened one way only from the mechanical side. It was the kind of door you had to hold for somebody. Maya had a symbol for those doors on her drawings, a little half moon, because he had explained them to her once, and she had decided they mattered. He got a second handheld out of the tool cart, thumbed it to the channel the hotel used for engineering, and waited for a patrol to pass before he slid it across the carpet to Daniel Brooks. Daniel had spent the last 40 minutes on the floor with his cheek against the carpet, and he had used all of it. He knew which 2 were bleeding and which one was going into shock, and which of the 4 exits he could reach if somebody opened it for him. He palmed the radio without looking down at it. Then Isaiah worked the arithmetic, and this is the part he would go back to for the rest of his life. There were two ways to run it. He could wait 8 minutes for the shift when both stairwell men came inside for the count. That window was narrow, 12 people no more, and he could stay behind the counter the entire time, close enough that his daughter could see his shoulder if she turned her head. Or he could go now while the ventilation crossover was still unlocked and hold that one-way door open from the mechanical side himself. 28 people, maybe 30. But the door was 90 seconds away from Maya. He thought about it for a long time, and what he was really doing was letting a part of himself he had retired make the call. 28 is more than 12. That is not a hard problem. That is not even a problem. He put his hand on the side of Maya's face and said, "I need 90 seconds. Count for me, slow ones." She did not cry when he left. She started to count the way he had taught her. She got to 40 before her voice broke, and by 50, she was making a sound that carried farther than a whisper. And a man in a service jacket who should have been passing the coat check turned toward the northeast corner 11 seconds ahead of his cycle. He did not find her. He found a sight line to the service door instead, and the last group Daniel was moving was still in it. And on the Black Watch, a silent alarm no hotel system had ever known about lit up, because Victor Kane had brought his own sensors and put them on his own doors. He came out of the operations room without hurrying. He looked at the propped door, and at the 18 people already through it, and at the 10 who were not going to be. He did not raise his voice. That was the thing about him that Isaiah had understood in the first 90 seconds and had never stopped understanding. "Who opened it?" Victor said, not loudly. He said it the way a man asks for a check. Nobody answered. He walked 4 steps into the ballroom and took hold of the young man standing nearest the service door, a waiter with a tie that sat straight under his collar, and brought him out into the open floor. Cameron Ruiz said he did not know anything. He was telling the truth, and it was the last true thing anyone let him say. Victor looked past him into the operations room, where Ava Sterling was standing in the doorway between 2 of his men with a screen behind her. He did not ask her anything. He simply waited, and the waiting was the question. She could not answer it. There was no sentence available to her that ended anywhere except with a man in coveralls behind a maintenance counter and a girl underneath it. Her pulse went where a pulse goes. Behind her, the interface, which had been waiting politely for her since she stepped away from it, registered a second reading and put a second line on the screen. Coerced attempt. 1 remaining. Victor heard the tone it made, and because he heard it, he understood that talking had run out. Isaiah came back through the ventilation crossover at 88 seconds, which was 2 seconds faster than he had promised himself. It was still too late to do anything but see it. He made no sound at all. He did not move. He stood in the dark of the crossover with his hands open at his sides, and he stayed there long past the point where staying was safe, looking at a young man on the ballroom floor whose tie he had fixed 6 hours ago, who had wanted to be the one telling somebody else their tie was crooked. 18 people were out of the building. He had done that. He had chosen the plan that was supposed to be worth 28, and he had come back with 18 and 1 body, and there was no arithmetic in the world that made those numbers come out even. It was Maya who got him moving. She came out from under the counter as far as she dared, and took 2 of his fingers in her whole hand and pulled, and he came back into himself the way a man comes up out of water. They brought Ava back into the ballroom after that, and she ended up on the carpet 9 feet from him with her hands behind her head. The room was doing what rooms do. 62 people were looking at one place on the floor or looking hard away from it, and the sound they made together was a kind of low animal breathing. One man was doing neither. She watched him and could not work out what was wrong with the picture until she realized he was counting doors, left to right, then back. His lips did not move. His eyes went to the northeast fire exit and stopped there for exactly as long as a patrol took to clear it, then moved on. A hotel engineer had just watched a boy die in front of him, and he was measuring the room. She had met a lot of men who wanted her to think they were dangerous. She had never met one who was trying this hard to look like furniture. When the vent fans cycled up and gave them 11 seconds of noise, she used them. "You're not maintenance," she said to the carpet. Isaiah did not turn his head. "I'm maintenance. He's going to kill everyone in this room," she said. "I know that." The fans dropped. They waited. When the fans came back, she gave it to him fast and flat because there was not going to be a better minute than this one. It was not only fraud on that server. Fraud was the part she could have taken to a regulator. What she had found underneath it was a payment ledger, and the payments were for work that does not appear on invoices for people who stop existing on schedule. The man who had bought Victor Kane's 11 men was named Caldwell Briggs, who ran an investment group 4 blocks from here and had shaken her hand in March. And there was a switch. Half of it lived on that server. The other half lived with her brother Ethan, and if she stayed dark long enough, Ethan would turn his key and every page of it would be sitting in a federal inbox before sunrise. "How long?" Isaiah said. "He has to own the server inside the hour to stop it. Call it 40 minutes now." Then she told him the shape of the trap, and it was worse than either half of it alone. If she opened the drive, Victor would wipe it, and then there was no reason on earth for 62 witnesses to walk out of a hotel. If she refused, he would keep taking people out onto that floor. And every time he did, her heart would do what hearts do, and the system would refuse her again, and there was one attempt left before it sealed itself and sent. "Then use it," Isaiah said. "Walk over there and fail on purpose. I've been thinking about that since the second one." Her voice had gone very flat. "It's sealed and it sends, and it makes a sound when it does it, and he's standing next to the machine when it happens. He hears it. He knows the evidence is already gone, and every reason he had to keep this room alive dies in that second. Federal servers don't move fast at 11 at night. He'd have this building in the street before anybody upstairs read the first page." She turned her face a few degrees toward him. "I can end this whenever I want. I just have to trade everyone in the room for it." Her fear was manufacturing the next body, and her only weapon was a switch she could not afford to pull. That was the design flaw nobody had written into the specification. Isaiah stopped counting doors. Up to that moment, his war had been 8 feet wide and had a child at the center of it. Get her out. Keep her breathing. Let the men with rifles outside do the rest. There were no men coming through those doors. There was a countdown he could not see, and a woman on the carpet beside him who understood a system he could not touch, and 62 people between them and the street. "I know this building," he said. "Every duct, every panel, every door that only opens one way. And I know every lock in it that runs on current," Ava said, "which is all of them." They lay there 9 feet apart on a ballroom floor, 2 halves of a plan neither of them could have made alone. The vent fans came back. She used them for something that had nothing to do with the plan. "Can I ask you something?" Ava said. "A man who can do whatever it is you can do. Why are you fixing pipes?" He looked over at Maya, who was sitting with her back against the counter and her knees pulled up, counting under her breath because that was the job he had given her. "Some people think leaving the field is running away," Isaiah said. "I think sometimes building a quiet life is harder than taking a target apart." The fans held. Ava turned her head and looked at him for a while, and then she said the only thing anybody said to him that night that landed. "So which one did you just do?" He did not have an answer. That was the point of the question. The war he was actually fighting had never been about proving he was still a soldier. It was about staying the man he had spent 4 years becoming after he stopped being one. And 90 minutes into this, that man had run the numbers like a lieutenant and left his daughter alone for 90 seconds, and something had come out of it that he was going to carry. At 10 o'clock, Victor Kane began to tighten the room, and he did it in 4 moves. The first was Maya. He had one of his men walk the hostages into 3 separate groups against 3 separate walls, splitting families as he went, and the girl in the yellow shirt went to the far group with a woman she had never met. He did not know whose daughter she was. He was only spreading his risk, and there was something in that carelessness that frightened Isaiah more than malice would have. A man who hates you can be predicted. A man who is simply organizing cannot. The second was the laundry. One of them followed the wet marks on the corridor floor down to the linen line and came back with a strip of towel and a look on his face, and the one route out of that ballroom stopped being a route. The third was the thing nobody in the room understood while it was happening. Victor had Ava brought back to the operations room, and then he gave her 10 minutes off. He put a bottle of water in front of her. He turned the overhead light down. He sent his technician out to the corridor to work the bypass rig from a laptop through the doorway, and he stood by the door himself, where she could see his hands, and he did not say one word about the drive or the boy on the ballroom floor or the time. He was bringing her heart rate down. He had watched the machine take 2 readings, and he had finally understood exactly what it wanted from him, and what it wanted was a calm woman. It was the kindest thing anyone did in that hotel all night, and it was the most dangerous thing that happened in it. The 4th was a number spoken out loud so all 3 walls could hear it. 20 minutes until he owned the server. And if the police put a man through a door, or if anybody in this room made him decide the night was over, he would put his thumb on the initiator himself, and none of them would hear the second half of the sentence. Isaiah went for the camera control room at 10 up through the mechanical chase behind the west elevators, and Victor was already waiting for him. Not for him personally, for the idea of him. A door had opened at the top of a service stair that was not on the electronic plan, and a hostage group had moved with something that looked like organization, and Victor Kane had drawn the correct conclusion from that there was somebody in this building who knew the building. So there was a man kneeling in the narrow corridor at the top of the chase, with a rifle across his knees, and the only reason Isaiah did not walk into it was that he heard the man's breathing before he heard anything else. He got back down. He got back down clean. It did not matter. In the 11 minutes he was gone, they took Daniel Brooks out of the second group and put him face down by the coat check, and they took the engineering handheld off him. They put Ava behind a magnetic lock and left the technician in the corridor outside it. They shut down the ventilation on the conference level, which killed the 11-second windows and the noise and the airflow all at once, and they welded the crossover shut with a bar through the handles. And when Isaiah came out from behind the maintenance counter for the head count, 2 of them already had their hands on him. Victor crossed the ballroom and looked at the man they were holding. Wet coveralls, name badge, a cheap flashlight clipped at the hip, and a maintenance log folded in the back pocket. He looked at the coveralls, and then he looked at the face above them, and something behind his eyes went back through 5 hours of the evening and rearranged all of it. He tilted his head, and when he spoke, there was something in it that was almost admiration. "You've been here the whole time," Victor said. "Right in front of me." He said it the way a man says a thing he should have known, and by the time a man says that, it has already cost him. Then he waved his men off, which was the kind of thing he did when he wanted a room to watch. "Let him go. He's not going to do anything." He looked over at the far wall. "Bring the girl closer. I want him to have something to look at." They put Isaiah on his knees in the open floor, and they brought Maya 5 steps out from the wall and stopped her there close enough that he could see the pulse going in her throat. She had been holding it together for 40 minutes, and when she saw her father on the carpet, she stopped being able to, and the young man beside her got tired of telling her to face the wall and took her arm hard enough to lift her heels off the floor. That was the end of every plan Isaiah had. Move, and there was a black watch in the room. Don't move. And they had found the handle that turned him and the handle that turned Ava, and it was 8 years old and wearing a yellow shirt. There was no better moment coming. There was no version of this where he waited. Then he looked at Victor's left wrist, and the wrist was bare. The watch was gone. It had been on him at 9, and it was not on him now, and Isaiah understood the logic of it immediately because he had been trained by men who thought the same way. You never carry the master on your body when the room might get close enough to take it off you. You put it somewhere locked with a man in front of it, and you keep one short-range trigger in your pocket that reaches the 2 charges you can see. Victor had done both. He had sent the watch upstairs to a room full of monitors, and he had kept the small one for himself. The whole night Isaiah had been waiting for a mistake that size. He found Maya's eyes across 5 steps of ballroom and held them, and he moved his chin down half an inch. The part of his life he had folded up and put away 4 years ago stood up inside him, and he let it. He had not told her to be brave. He never once used that word with her. What he had told her when there was still time to tell her anything was this: "You don't have to do anything big. When I give you the sign, all you have to do is get down." In a crisis, giving a person one clear job will hold them up longer than telling them not to be afraid. The man holding Maya was looking at Isaiah, which was the mistake because Isaiah had already given up on being looked at. He came off his knees inside the 2 seconds it took the man to decide whether kneeling meant anything, and 5 steps is nothing to a man who has spent 5 hours measuring the distance. He did not reach for the rifle. Reaching for a rifle takes a man's whole attention and gives him something to fight for. Isaiah took the elbow instead, then the wrist, then the shoulder joint, and the arm that had been lifting an 8-year-old off her heels came apart in a direction arms are not built for. He did not fire a shot. A shot would have crossed the ballroom in front of a man with a trigger in his pocket, and Isaiah had spent 5 hours learning exactly what noise would do in this room. Maya went down before the man did. She dropped flat with her arms over her head and stayed there because that was the only job she had been given, and she had been holding it since 10 o'clock. Isaiah put a hand under her arm and moved her along the wall to the coat check where Daniel Brooks was face down with his fingers laced behind his head, and he said, "She's yours." And Daniel had her behind the counter before anyone in the room had finished turning around. That was the end of the maintenance engineer. Every person in that ballroom saw it, and so did the man who had walked past him 11 times in 5 hours. There was no going back to the empty box now. From this moment, there were exactly 2 endings available in the Grand Meridian, and one of them had 62 coffins in it. So Isaiah stopped hiding and started using the building. He went out through the northeast corner in the 17 seconds between the end of one patrol and the beginning of the next, because he had been counting that cycle since 9 o'clock and knew it the way he knew his own name. He crossed under the drifted ballroom camera, the one that had been 3 inches off its mount since a note he had written in a logbook 3 weeks ago that nobody upstairs had thought was worth a work order, and the man watching the wall of monitors upstairs saw an empty stretch of carpet. In the service corridor, he opened the fire panel with a key on his own ring. He did not pull the alarm. He put water and smoke exactly where he wanted them. The sprinkler heads went off over the west vestibule and the north corridor 2 floors apart, and the smoke extract fans came up hard in both. And to 11 men who had spent the evening waiting for a breach, it looked and sounded precisely like a breach. 2 of them ran for the west stairs to meet an assault that was not there. Isaiah had 2 radios on him now, his own hotel handheld, and the crew set he had taken off the man with the ruined arm. He kept one in each pocket so he would not confuse them, and on the crew channel in a stretch of the 2nd floor corridor where the hotel's radios had gone dead for as long as anyone could remember, he keyed the transmit and said 4 words in a voice that could have belonged to anybody. "West stair, they're inside." Victor Kane heard it and knew immediately that it was a lie. But 3 of his men did not, and for 90 seconds the Grand Meridian belonged to a man in wet coveralls. He spent all 90 of them on the laundry. Daniel had the coat check group moving before Isaiah reached him, because Daniel had been getting people who could not walk to places they could not get to since he was 23 years old, and a bad knee had never taken that part away. He did not fight. He sorted. The 2 with crush injuries from the first minute went in the middle where hands could reach them from both sides. The woman from table 4, who had been breathing wrong for 5 hours, went with a bellman who could carry her. He put the steadiest adults at the front and the back and the frightened ones between, and he moved them through the low corridor under the west side of the ballroom where the linen carts ran 1 wall at a time in the dark. At the top of the service stair was the fire door that only opened from the mechanical side. It was the whole reason the route existed. Ava Sterling saw it 40 seconds before they reached it. She was still behind a magnetic lock with a screen she could not open, and a technician in the corridor outside, but a locked door and a dead terminal are 2 different problems, and the second one she could solve. The building management system did not care who she was. It ran on the same current as every lock in the hotel, and it had a console on the desk, and when she brought up the fire and life safety layer, the thermal sensor above the service door was reading 11 degrees warmer than the corridor around it. Nothing in a stairwell runs warm at 11 at night. She got onto the engineering channel through the console's paging interface and said one sentence flat and fast, and Isaiah stopped Daniel with a hand on his chest 8 feet from a door that had a hand-built charge sitting on the frame above it. Victor had found the laundry line an hour ago. He had left it open on purpose. There was nowhere else to go. The crossover was welded. The west stairs had 2 of his men on them. The service door was a killing frame, and the corridor behind them was filling with people who had nothing left. Then a small voice from the middle of the group said, "Dad, the half moon." Maya was looking at the emergency evacuation placard bolted to the corridor wall, the kind that hangs in every hotel in America, and that nobody has ever read. On the diagram behind the kitchen, there was a stair marked with a symbol she had invented for herself on the back of a banquet order form, a little half moon, because her father had explained one-way doors to her once, and she had decided they deserved their own mark. Isaiah knew that stair. It had been sealed off when the kitchen was rebuilt and left in place because tearing it out was expensive. It carried no card readers and no alarms and no current at all, which meant it did not exist on any electronic plan, which meant it had never existed for Victor Kane. The girl did not fight anybody. She remembered one thing that 62 grown adults had walked past every day of their lives without seeing. Isaiah went up for the watch alone, and the second time he left his daughter, he did it differently. He knelt down in front of her in the dark of the kitchen corridor and told her where he was going and why, and that it would be about 6 minutes, and that her job for those 6 minutes was to stay with Daniel and keep the 2 smallest kids counting. Then he put her hand in Daniel's hand so she could see the handoff happen. He had not done any of that at 9:30. At 9:30, he had run the arithmetic like a lieutenant, and 28 was more than 12, and a young man with a straight tie had paid for the difference. The camera control room was on the floor above the ballroom, and the man in it had a wall of monitors, a rifle across a chair, and a black watch sitting on the desk beside a coffee cup because it did not fit over his glove. He was watching the west stair where nothing was happening. Isaiah came in through the service door behind him, and it was over in 4 seconds, and then he was holding the only thing in the hotel that could take that building down from a distance. He turned it over in his hand, and the small readout on the face told him the truth, and the truth was worse than nothing. The watch reached the columns and the stairwells and the front doors. It reached everything. But it was a transmitter, and a transmitter is only ever the long way to do something, and Victor Kane had kept the short way in his own pocket, a stub trigger with a range you could measure in feet, good for the 2 charges nearest whatever room he happened to be standing in. Isaiah had just won the thing he had been waiting 5 hours for, and it had bought him exactly nothing. He took the cruise radio and the monitor wall anyway and used both. 1 floor below, Ava Sterling stopped waiting to be rescued. The operations room had a magnetic lock, and magnetic locks are wired to release when the building believes something is wrong. She could not fake a fire because Victor had a man on the fire panel now, but the room was full of servers, and servers have a temperature at which the building is required to open every door around them and vent, and that override sat on the same console as everything else. She drove the room's cooling into an emergency dump and watched the lock give up. Then she went back to the drive. There was a physical key seated in the front of it, a slim authentication card the length of her hand, and it was the second half of the reason the system was hard to steal. The card did not open the data. It told the drive that a legitimate session was possible. Without it in the slot, the bypass rig that had been chewing on that machine since 9 o'clock was working on a locked box that could not be persuaded. She pulled it out and put it inside her jacket, and out in the corridor the technician's laptop went red. After that, she started opening fire doors, one at a time, from the console all the way down the north side of the building and on the avenue outside a command post that had been staring at a sealed hotel for 2 hours, watched it begin to bleed people out of its side into the street. She was in the north corridor with the drive under her arm when Victor Kane stepped out ahead of her. He was not angry. That was the worst part of him, and it never changed. He had 2 men left near him and a helicopter he had paid for sitting on a pad 11 blocks away with a pilot who had been told to lift at 11:15, and he looked at the woman holding the only object in the building that still had value to anybody. "You've made this simpler," Victor said. "If I can't erase it, I'll carry it. And you're coming with it because a drive by itself is evidence, and a drive with you attached to it is leverage." He sent both men down to hold the north fire doors she had just opened and took her up the stair toward the roof alone. And he did not touch her wrist once, because he had learned 6 hours ago that touching her wrist was the one thing that never worked. The call came through when they were 4 steps from the roof door. Isaiah heard both sides of it because he had the crew's radio, and because Caldwell Briggs, 4 blocks away in a glass office with his coat still on, was not a careful man when he was frightened. Briggs did not want the drive anymore. Briggs wanted the building. Every charge, all of it, the columns and the stairwells and the front doors and the whole conference level in the street before the first federal vehicle arrived. He said the word sterilized twice. He said there was to be nothing left in that hotel that could sit in a witness chair. Victor asked whether that included the 11 men he had brought inside. Briggs said yes. Victor listened to the rest of it without saying anything at all, standing on a stairwell landing with a woman's arm in his hand, and something happened behind his eyes that had not happened all night. He had spent 5 hours putting 80 human beings into boxes. Useful, not useful, loud, manageable. He had run the room with a category for every person in it, and he had been right about almost every one. And 4 blocks away, a man in a good coat had looked at Victor Kane and made exactly the same calculation and put him in exactly the same box and closed the lid. The man who had spent the night sorting people had just been sorted. At the top of the stair, the roof door was a heavy fire door with a bar across it, and to get it open he had to use both hands. He took the stub trigger out of his pocket and clipped it to his belt at the hip and put his shoulder into the bar. And Ava Sterling stood 2 feet behind him with a drive under one arm and a card in her jacket, and about 3 seconds of a man's full attention pointed somewhere else. She did not do anything dramatic. She reached down and pushed the card in edge-on under the trigger guard hard until the plastic bent and stopped. Then she followed him out into the wind. Isaiah came up the north stair 90 seconds behind them. He had a rifle now and a clean lane, and he did not take the shot because Ava was standing 4 feet from Victor with the drive in her arms, and the trigger was back in Victor's right hand with his thumb already resting on it. A dead man's hand closes. That is not a theory. So he did the only thing left, which was to make Victor look at his own situation and see it correctly for once. "Your client just ordered this building down with you inside it," Isaiah said. "I heard him say it twice." Victor did not turn all the way around. "You've been listening to my radio for an hour. That's not new information, it's just the first time you've used it." "Then use this. 2 of your men walked out the north fire doors 20 minutes ago into a police line. The rest are down or in the stairwell. There's nobody left in this building who works for you." "There's a helicopter." There was. It stopped being yours the second Briggs decided the roof of a collapsing hotel wasn't a place he wanted his name. The wind came across the gravel, and Victor looked at the woman beside him, and at the drive, and at the thing in his own hand. "And the data," Isaiah said. "That stopped mattering at 10:25. Her brother turned his key when she went dark past the hour. It's been in a federal system since before I broke your man's arm downstairs. You can push that. It won't save you. It'll just finish the job for the man who threw you away." Victor Kane stood there for a while with his thumb on the trigger. Then he crouched and set it down on the gravel and put his rifle beside it and straightened up with his hands open. "All right," he said. Isaiah started forward. Victor went for it at 4 feet low and fast, the way a man moves when he has decided that being alive at the end of the night is no longer one of the options. He got his hand on it. He got his thumb where his thumb needed to be. And the button did not travel because there was a slim authentication card wedged edge-on into the housing under the guard, driven in hard enough to bend, and Ava Sterling had put it there while a man was busy shouldering a fire door open. The trigger went out of his hand and skidded across the gravel and lay there, and the Grand Meridian stayed standing. Isaiah put him down and held him down, and it was finished. Not by one man, by a woman who had stopped waiting to be saved, holding the last piece of a thing everyone in that building had spent the night trying to take from her, and by a soldier who had come back up a stairwell for her.